Hey, it's Jason Desmond. Welcome to the Jantan Collective. We are here to broaden our manly horizons, to seek progress, I suppose. Basically, we want to learn to be better versions of ourselves, right? So today, this conversation is going to be about the gender gap, the gender pay gap, that glass ceiling, if you will. In fact, why is there a gender pay gap between men and women? Like, what's up with that? To have a very, very frank conversation about that, we have two experts in their own field, I suppose. Yes, we have Ren Chung, Ren from Star Wars. Yes, Deputy Executive Director of the Women's Aid Organization, and we also have my alter ego in a way, I suppose, in many ways. Writer, presenter, all-round Wonder Woman, Freda Liu. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
How are you feeling?
Great.
Ready to tackle this? Because I have many questions, and I'm a blur cow, seriously, because I really, really want to know about the glass ceiling. I've heard about the glass ceiling for many, many years. As a kid, I would listen to all the older folks talk about it, and I'm like, what is this? Right? Is it real? Is it a myth? What is the glass ceiling? We're in the 21st century. Is it still around? Ren?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely still a very relevant concept. And if you just look at Malaysia, does the glass ceiling exist? I think the answer is undoubtedly yes. If you look at any sector, almost any sector, and when we talk about the very top leadership, it's not even 30%. In many cases, it's around 10% or so. So if you look at, of course, if you look at the political sphere, the cabinets, the elected representatives, not even 20% are women. If you look at private sector, you can look at things like who's on the board of directors. If you look at private companies, 20-something%. If you look at listed companies, public listed, public, private, unlisted companies, it's less than 20% directors as well. If you look at top management, which is a category that was reported by in a Grant Thornton report, also less than 30%. So if you just look at the numbers, it's very clear that glass ceiling does exist. Now, the one sector perhaps where maybe the glass ceiling has somewhat been shattered is actually the judiciary, where at the federal court level, a majority are women now, and this is a new development.
Okay.
But by and large, in every sector and every other sector, even the minimum of 30% is not reached. So the question is then why? But the fact of the matter is, it does exist.
So this is worldwide, or Malaysia? Have we caught up? Are we still way, way behind, Freda?
Okay, we have definitely caught up. Unfortunately, it is still a global phenomenon. I guess we can talk about Malaysia with the facts, right? And just to add on to that as well, even in businesses, the last economic census that came out in 2015, only 20.1% of businesses in Malaysia are owned by women. So again, we're still not even 30%. If you look at we talk about sustainability and SDGs, right? And one of the things is gender equality. Where Malaysia is, we are moving up, but we will not be able to achieve gender equality by 2030. So yes, it is still very much a problem.
How far behind are we to?
We're very far behind. We're very far behind. If you look at any global index,
okay,
World Economic Forum has an index, UN Human Development Index. Even regionally, we're quite bad. We're maybe in the bottom third of all countries when it comes to these indicators. I mean, in many ways, we're doing well, but in these particular indicators, we're doing very poorly, actually.
So how are we compared to, and Malaysians will hate it when I do this, right? Compared to Singapore?
I have to look at that. So I don't quite know.
Because I've lived in Singapore for a bit, and the women who are there seem to be, I don't know, okay, this is all from my perception. They just seem to be more, what's the word I can use? Like they're go-getters in a way. They're in top management, in some cases, they're global directors of this, they're CFOs of that, and whether they actually become CEOs is a whole other thing, but I see a lot of really powerful women of all from different races and different countries in the world, but they all seem to converge in Singapore for some reason.
Right.
Then Malaysia, it's like
Okay, so I don't know about the numbers in Singapore as well, but I would think that we're still not there yet. Countries, if you look at it from a political point of view, right, the bright sparks, you've got New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
In Scandinavia, all of Scandinavia, other than Sweden, are run by women, right? And then even with the cabinet in Finland, I believe that most of them are women, right? So what we're trying to say here when we talk about gender equality is, we're not trying to, we're just so far from 50-50, right? Forget about diversity where you talk about, age and all the other factors, right? And race and all that. Just gender alone, we're just still far from it.
So, instead of talking about the highest levels, all right, let's go down even lower, like someone who goes into a work for the first time. Boy, girl, fresh grad goes into the job market. There's already a certain kind of a ceiling there already where males get paid more, generally. Why is that?
This is an interesting concept. I mean, people talk about glass ceiling, and then there's another concept like sticky floor, as they call it. So it's kind of looking at things from the other side. Two things we can highlight, I think. So first, it's just looking at labor force participation. Are you even in the labor force? Women in Malaysia, it's about 55% labor force participation compared to 80% for men. And this is really low compared to any other country. In fact, ASEAN were one at the bottom in terms of this. So even getting your sort of into the labor market is already a huge disparity there. And of course, the biggest reason cited is household and family responsibilities. So women are expected to do all those things. And then because of that, they're not even in the workforce. So if you look at Department of Statistics numbers, there are over 2 million women who are not in the workforce because of this. And there are only maybe 100,000 men who cite household responsibilities that prevented them from going into the...
But it's not an urban issue though, right? I mean,
no, it's not. Right. It's just across the board.
Outskirts and in some kampong or some smaller town and everything, right?
So the challenge here is they would join the workforce, and by the time they get married and have children, they would normally leave, right? So the idea is the thinking that it is the woman's job to take care of the household. So that is the issue, right? So I've always had conversations with people, both genders, and say, other than breastfeeding, raising a family is an equal responsibility for both genders. So what can we do is that's why things like parental leave, paternity leave is very important, because that's the message that you sent out, right? So where I'm working right now, the paternity leave is 4 weeks, which is there is in my organization, which is a SME. So we don't have to wait for the government.
Right.
So if an SME can make that initiative, that's a very powerful message that you're saying.
So how does it work there? So
if you have a kid and you're a father, you also have a month's leave. So it's a subtle message, right? But what's going to happen, societal expectations as well, right? Do you then, because you're a woman, are responsible for certain things, right? So until we change that story, right? The expectation is that raising a child is still the job, right? If you know of house fathers, what is your perception of a house father?
Stay at home, He's the exact version of a housewife, but he's just...
Right, but do you have a negative connotation to that as well?
I guess there's a reason why a lot of guys that I've spoken to, right? So what are you doing? He works at home, right? I mean, he takes care of the kids. He is the house father, house husband, whatever you want to call it, right? Now, he will always say, "Oh no, I'm working on something right now, you know. I have a project that I want to get off the ground. So this working from home thing is just a temporary thing."
Right. So the perception that
he feels he needs to justify himself, right? Yeah, but I think this is a good point in terms of how people feel about being. But I think the point that Freda was talking about is just on how can we create a framework that actually enables that. Yeah. That is, I think, a more important question, because even if you want to be to play an equal role, even during the first few weeks of childbirth, you can't. Many people, there is no requirement to have paternity leave in Malaysia. There's no such thing as paternity leave in employment law. Yeah. So imagine if your father and your wife has just given birth, it's not a given that you even can be there during. I know one case where the company said, there's no paternity leave, but you can apply for leave. But you need to know when that date is, right? So, but you don't know when the child's exactly going to be born.
Yeah.
It could be 1 week, it could be like... So if you don't apply in time, you can't even go. So that person wasn't able to be there because he didn't know the date.
Right.
So he applied, then it was off a few days, so he couldn't actually be there. So it's just simple things. So if you do not have a concept of paternity leave, then it makes it very difficult for men to actually play that equal role.
So how generally in Malaysia, how long is, because I'm clueless about it, how long is the maternity leave for a lady?
3 months now. Legally, 3 months. Legally. So some companies give more, right? But every company has to give at least 3 months.
Okay. And the guys, for paternity leave, it's a month now.
No,
So-
in
so-
my case, mine is a very, very odd case.
Yeah.
Very rare case.
I don't know whether
Yeah.
in my other organization, I won't mention which one, but I don't know whether they have it.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not even 3 months yet. It's 2 months, but there's been a promise for years to make it 3 months, and there's an act.
Oh, it's not legal.
It's 2 months right now,
Oh.
and there is a proposal. There's a law drafted. It's sitting in the government, in the Ministry of Human Resources,
Right,
that
so-
needs to be passed
not actually-
to make it 90 days. or
Right,
90
I
days,
didn't
whatever
know
it is.
that.
Right.
And
Because I had mine years
there's a
ago.
law sitting there waiting to be passed. It has paternity leave
Right.
inside it. Maybe not that long paternity leave, 3 or 7 days, but it's there. That law exists, and because of what's going on now, things have not moved. So someone just needs to take the initiative and take that law and bring it to
Right.
to Parliament.
But
and pass it.
That's further down the line even. I mean, like, do girls consciously go, maybe I shouldn't get a job now. I've gone to get my degree already, but my family, I want to stay home. I want to, if I meet a guy, I'm going to marry him and have kids. So
who fed the idea lah?
yeah, right?
So who fed the idea that that's
Is it
your...
generational?
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, so
And
there
societal.
are more than 2 million people like that,
Yes.
according to statistics, to Department of Statistics.
But again, it's not an urban. It's a more rural.
No.
I'm not sure
no.
of the breakdown, but this is
Yeah.
something
This
that...
happens here.
Yes. Because it's also not cheap now to get help.
Yeah.
Back a couple years ago, it was cheaper to get help. Now it's not cheap to get help as well. So where is your support structure? And then, so it's just like, then why should I go to work when I work as much just to pay the maid?
Yeah.
Right, so there's that issue as well. So things have changed, and so who then, if the logic is like whoever gets paid more should stay at home, whoever gets paid more goes to work,
Yeah.
right? If that was the story,
Yeah.
then maybe we would have more of men,
Yeah.
right, and staying at home, and women going.
Ultimately, it comes back to the question, like, the pay gap is causing a lot of issues here as well.
There's also, like, I'm digressing here, but there's also the pressure on men, right? You got to be the breadwinner. You've got to, so that's also ingrained in men as well. That this is your job, right? So there's, if you say there's the stereotype for women, there's also the stereotype for men. Maybe some men want to work, be at home with the kids, but you have not been told that that's
The right thing
to do. So
Yeah.
that also, to me, is also not right.
That's another thing, because sometimes we constantly wonder whether how things are set up. Like, men should do not hard labor, but more labor-intensive work, and girls are more conscientious. They do a lot of great detail work and everything. So we already have a predetermined idea of what we will be doing. Like, it's back down to the Barbies and G.I. Joe toys all over again. It's biological, it's sociological. Women shouldn't be doing jobs on an oil rig, because engineering jobs like that are dangerous. They should just stick to pharmacy and probably be vets and everything.
Right, so it's whether you listen, this will probably come advice from parents, right? So
Yeah.
whether you go against the grind and say, no, I'm going to do this anyway, then things will change, so that's also the issue.
Has it changed over the generations, at least slightly?
I'm not sure of the trends, but it certainly still exists. If you look
Yeah.
at, the clearest example is nurses. 97% of nurses in Malaysia are women.
Right.
So there's that 3% who are men, but 97% are women. So that's the prime example of exactly what you're saying. And I think at one level, yes, it's about our upbringing, and it's about the dreams that we have as children, and but partially it's also about the environment that we create.
Right.
You mentioned oil rig. Is an oil rig somewhere that you feel it's conducive for women, right? So maybe there's a reason why. There's also another reason why women tend to not work in certain fields, because they can't get in, or if they go in, they're in an environment where it's not somewhere they can thrive and be safe. So I'm just using the oil rigs because you mentioned it, but we have to look at both sort of from the perspective of the person, but also from the environment that we create.
Because biologically we're just built different in some cases.
But then who's to decide whether I want to go to the oil rig or not, right?
Yeah.
I might want to go to the oil rig.
Yeah.
Right? So, but who's told, first of all, I don't have the brains for science to qualify to go oil rig, but where was that teaching that I shouldn't be out there? Where was that expectation that a woman can't go out there? Why not, right? It's not really hard labor. It's just like you're out offshore, right? But even then, where did you put the barrier on that?
Right.
Right? A woman says, I can do it. If they want to do it, they should be given. So the thing is that conversation where you allow the person to decide. And that's the most important thing. Then the roads, is everything open, first of all? And does society encourage it, right? So I just want to talk a little bit about growing up, right? For me. How being the youngest in my family, right, was very fortunate because my siblings, my 3 older siblings, were a little bit older. The last one being 4 years older. So by the time they got to the 4th,
Boys, girls?
2 boys and 1 sister, right, and then there's me, right. By the time they got to the 4th child, they were so tired of parenting.
You do whatever you want.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate in the sense that I had never had this. A boy should do this. A girl should do this. I've never had that expectation of what I can or cannot do, and they just encouraged me with whatever because they were tired lah. But and that was, and I want to give that environment to my son, right? Whatever that you want to do, there is no right or wrong, right? We're all geared differently, and that is important, right? So because I've had that privilege, right? When you talk about a glass ceiling and things like that, what I only hear about when I entered the workforce. But as a child, growing up, going to university, I never felt I couldn't do anything.
Okay.
Right? I didn't feel that there were any barriers to my growth.
But that's more because you were the youngest child and then you were tired.
Yeah, tired, right? So, but what I'm saying is, thank God for that, right?
Yeah.
Because I had so if you can, understand that each person is different, and that not some jobs are for men or for women, is your personal interest, right?
Yeah.
So, do we have then also our own unconscious bias?
Yes.
Right?
Right. Like when you're one of the other unconscious biases, and possibly it's also slightly conscious, is the fact that when an employer wants to hire someone, back to Ren's point just now about maternity leave being 3 months and for men it's just 1 month, does that make it an issue for employers to go, I won't have this person.
There is no paternity leave.
Yeah, exactly. It's not in your case, right? But that 3 months or 2 months right now, I will be without this particular person. Really, really good at what she does, right? And that makes it worse. Because let's say this girl comes in, spot on, can get everything done, get off the ground running, comes in after graduation, joins the company, and then changes everything. And then she's great, 2 years in, boom, she gets pregnant, she won't be around for 2 months. Then everything...
Oh, that statement just made me so angry. But go on.
No, but does that make people wonder, like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't hire a girl? Because I'll be without
it does
girl.
happen. We know it does happen. The question is whether it should happen.
Yeah.
Is the point.
Yeah.
It does happen, but the thing is, excuse me, unfortunately, it's only the woman who can bear children, right?
I completely agree.
And so I have like my where I'm working at the moment. We had one colleague who joined and then got the job, and then after that said, oh, by the way, I am pregnant, and my boss said, so. What's that got to do anything, right? So that's just the life cycle. Only the woman can get pregnant. You're good at what you do. You'll come back and you'll do the work. What does it matter, right? Everybody learns to adjust. Everybody learns to do that. Because I'm very fortunate. I've worked for the MNC before this as well, right? And they were very pro, working from home. They were very pro about, so that you've got your maternity leave and all that. So all these things were not. But I also chose to work with these companies, right? Who are very progressive in their thinking, and that's important as well.
I mean, from a company's point of view, it's about talent acquisition, it's about talent retention. And I mean, as Freda was just saying, they were able to benefit from Freda's talent because they had these policies.
Yeah.
Right.
So if they did not, then talented people like Freda and others would not go to those kind of companies.
Yeah.
I think the larger point is that, childbirth is a social function.
Yeah.
It's a public function.
Yeah.
And from a public point of view, if we don't have that, then society would not be able to
Falls apart.
to
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah.
So we need to look at it that way and think, how can we create a system, create frameworks where we enable this to happen, and we enable this to happen so that men also need to play a more equal role in that whole function. So things like paternity leave, things like parental leave, that's why those things are so important.
This glass ceiling thing is not just in a corporate setting. It happens even in sports, and I think in many ways it affects how our Malaysian women do in sports as well internationally, because there's always this thought at the back of their mind, I don't know whether I can commit and whatnot. But when you look internationally, it's also slightly worrying, because for the longest time in tennis, let's just use tennis as an example, because Serena Williams is bar none probably one of the greatest tennis players of all time. When I say probably one of the best, because there's an argument between the amount of time that they're on court for. Okay, they're playing less games in a match, and their tournaments are shorter, and then there are less people watching it. But then Roger Federer plays best of five matches.
Right.
Who's greater? Who's better? But they kind of got the wage thing kind of down pat, that women will get the same amount of prize money as well, right? When you think of that, in sports, is there still a glass ceiling, you think? Tennis is just one of the examples where there's not, probably.
Well, I mean, absolutely there is. I think you mentioned Malaysia and international. I think there are two issues. So one is just participation in general. Do girls actually are they able to participate in sports equally to boys?
Yeah.
I think the answer is no, for various reasons you can think of.
Yeah.
In terms of glass ceiling, I mean, almost any sport imaginable. You can look at the
Soccer.
The wages between and prize monies of men and women, and it's different. It's not equal. So absolutely, it's still exists.
So the issue there is, a lot of people say there's less people watching these sports. Like the US women's soccer team, probably one of the greatest teams in the world when it comes to women's soccer, right? And yet they were demanding for equal pay. They didn't get it. I think the captain said it very clearly when she said, hey, we're just as good as the men, if not better.
Right.
Why don't we get more? But then in many cases, it's a business thing, right? Less people are watching it.
They were saying the sponsorship and all that,
Right.
right? So okay, there's also what you can do to market these women a little bit more, because the men are marketed more, right, than women. So there's you can just say sponsorship is not. It's not going to happen overnight, right? But you got to put more effort to market these people and to put it on a higher pedestal, and then the money will come, right? So it's really, when you talk about football, wow, the disparity there, right? And she was saying about girls in sports, right? And I've heard this, you'll get dark, you'll stink.
Right.
Girls, so you if you're getting messages like this, it's seriously wrong, right? So you really don't have enough participation. I mean, thank God we have our Nicole David, right? So I mean, big names. Of course, there are a couple more other names, but at least we have those names, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole glass ceiling thing. I mean, if you were a woman athlete, right, and people told you, oh, you're getting paid X% less because the money is not there, because no one's watching. I mean, I feel like that's quite unfair. It's not. The reason why they're not getting paid as much, I mean, you have to look at it. So Freda was saying, maybe they're not marketed enough.
Yeah.
Maybe society is geared in such a way that they value women less than men. That's not the fault of the woman athlete. So she's not wrong to be demanding to get equally what men gets. I mean, from her point of view, that's only fair. Like, the reason why she's not getting that equal pay is due to multiple levels of unfairness and oppression at various levels, which have nothing to do with her.
Right.
So it's definitely within their right to ask for it, and it's totally understandable.
So it's a systemic issue.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? For sure.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the way, people just thought, hey, this is how we've been doing it all along. Let's just stick to it, right? Because the guys can bring in a crowd. The girls, they're just pretty. Yes, they can bring in a crowd, but it's all about looks, right? There needs to be a systemic change, but that's inherently nearly impossible to do, isn't
well,
it?
you've raised an example of tennis where you said, I'm not sure of the statistics, but it seems to be, from what you're saying, is a bit more equal than other sports. So why is it that in tennis it may be a bit better compared to, say, football or soccer or some other sport?
So we should learn and see what did they
So
do.
it is possible.
Right? They would have probably marketed the women just as well, women in sports. So then we learn from who's doing it right, what can we do to change it, right? So rather than saying, oh, but the money is not, there must be a reason why. So people are watching women play tennis as much as they're watching the men play tennis.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So how did they get it right?
But I only watch women's tennis only when Serena plays. Right? The rest of them, I don't really know who they are sometimes. And I'm a tennis fan.
Okay.
Right? So you're right about the marketing bit, because probably deep down inside somewhere, there's a guy who's probably going, you know what, let's not focus too much on this because they're not as good or whatever it is, Serena's going to cream them. Let's just focus on the guys. So that's an issue though. And that's international sports. Back here, where it's much smaller, we can focus so much more. We had Charlene Zulkifli, we had Nicole David, we have so many great names that at some point they go, yeah, I'm not going to go too far. I might as well just quit. And some of them actually get corporate jobs.
Right.
They just quit. And then you go into like a place and you'll see them representing the company in all these company tournaments, but then they actually got corporate jobs. They had to go into that world because they were famous and whatever, they got the jobs. I'm not saying because they were famous they got the jobs, but that's where they went to.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of the girls who gave us our gold medal in the Commonwealth Games, like Serena and Carolyn. I know that they've started their own schools as well, gymnastics, right? So you've got a couple of these names as well, right, who've continued with their path and they've gone into teaching. So we also have to give them, so maybe we have to, there was a lot of emphasis and then they won and all that. Then suddenly everybody was going, everybody wanted to take up gymnastics because of that. So maybe we need more of these stories. That we have, I think we are world champions for women dodgeball in Malaysia.
Yeah, I heard that.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but
we don't watch it.
yeah.
We don't know about it.
Well, one of them works in my company.
Right.
But where is the face? Where is we're world champions, top 3 anyway.
I didn't know that.
Top 3,
right?
That's amazing.
But let's talk about, and I'm trying to be very, very careful with this. At what point does the idea of feminism, where I'm going to fight for women's rights, it goes too far into just the fight, and there's no logic behind it sometimes.
Can you give an example?
Okay, so I think it as long as we see these inequalities, then that makes sense. As long as we see a certain class of people, for no effort on their own, doing better off than the other class. So as long as that exists, we need to fight. Yeah, we need to.
Okay.
I still want to go back to your point, though, when you say when it's too much. Give an example when you think it's too much.
When
I think I know what you're trying to say.
I'm so going to get smashed with this. Simple things like opening a door.
Okay.
Or standing up and giving a woman the seat.
Well, there's just being polite and generous.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly, right? But sometimes we get slammed for this and what, you think I can open the door myself? Right? Or...
Well, I can see why some women may not appreciate it. If you think about the reasons as to why that practice became prominent, then you may feel, is it because it then upholds this kind of relationship that is stereotypical. So I think there are valid reasons to be annoyed by that kind of practice. But I think by and large, I don't think people are so. It's not,
about that.
Yeah. Just one example where someone might be a little bit annoyed by it, but a lot of it is also. I guess you can use the term like microaggressions. Well, this may not be an example of a microaggression, but it's sort of one act that it just piles up. Like every day I'm going through life and this happened to me. And
suddenly that was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was a little series of things, and you happen
it wasn't
to be
my fault.
Yeah, I know it's not, but that could be it. But that could be what we're saying. But to me, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think that's very sweet, right? I don't think you treat me any less. I just think you're just being chivalrous, right?
Yeah.
So I don't find that so,
We were having a chat about how just subconsciously sometimes you're not doing it out of spite, but when you're about to hire someone or you're about to promote someone, I don't know, like, cause she might get pregnant
Right.
or what was it that you said?
And so the term is called unconscious bias, right?
Right.
And it affects all of us, right? I was just sharing the story about how two individuals could be talking about a promotion for this woman, right? And then they were like, so and so, Mary will be really great for this job.
Okay.
Hey, but she's just given birth, I think she wants to spend time with the kid. So without even asking that person, you're ready, like, for the the best intentions,
Right.
but misplaced best intentions. So
Yeah.
this is what happens to unconscious bias, right? When you don't even think about something because you put your own filters on,
Yeah.
right? You haven't even asked, hey, do you want this job or not, right? But because you assume
Yeah.
that that's the case. So we all have these unconscious bias with us.
I still gotta get back to this physical thing. I'm just trying to get around it because generally, I'm pretty sure we're in the 21st century, especially in an urban setting. We're supposed to be woke already these days, right? We want women to have equal rights, equal pay, equal this, equal that, but inherently, physically, are there just some jobs that women cannot do or men just do better?
I think there are very few, if any, categories. Maybe like 1% of jobs, maybe or less than that. But even like things like you say, okay, require a labor. Oftentimes, people have tools, people have machines to operate machines to do it. So we've kind of moved beyond that necessity. But even if it is about some kind of physical strength, you can do things like have tests or ask the person to show that you can carry certain things. I mean, there are women in. I've seen a picture of a woman in India. She's a laborer carrying this huge gurney of rocks. So if her employer would have said, "Oh, I'm hiring men," then she wouldn't have had a job. But obviously, she could.
Yeah, and out of necessity, she had to take whatever job was available.
And she could do it.
Just took it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Security guards?
Well, the point is, women, we should not use the issue of safety as a reason to deny opportunities. So, for example, if you're a factory worker and you have a night shift, you might say, oh, women should not work night shifts because it's dangerous. But the idea is, okay, why don't you just make it safer for everyone?
Right.
So you could have more lights, maybe. You could have maybe a security person or whatever it is.
The security person would have been trained. A lot of security guards, most would have been trained in the army, and I'm just giving an example, or the police, right? So I'm sure that if they hired a security guard was a woman, she was probably trained as a police person before or in the army. So she knows what to do, right? So it's not a case of gender. So long as you know how to do your work, it shouldn't matter whether you're a man or a woman.
And there are women police officers. There are women security guards.
In many cases, Freda, when you just got into the industry, did you ever face any kind of harassment in any, like, boys just being boys?
They will talk about these things as well. And then okay, so it was, they do. And then you just sort of leave it, or you don't speak up about it, right? And you just sort of like let it go. I mean, like in my earlier job, those are verbal, right? And then you've got physical as well. I think every woman would have had some form of harassment. When I was working my first job in the hotel, then I was going to the staff lift. And there was a manager in the lift, and he comes up next to me and he says, "Look, fresh fish," right? And he comes right next to me, and his elbows are touching my tits.
Right.
And you're 17, 18 years old, you just don't know what to do. So every woman would have been harassed in some way or the other, right? So the thing is, then you need to protect yourself, So you need to speak up, right? This is a tough one, but you have to speak up and say these things, and this is not all right. Right? So when you're younger, in my field and everything, when I was working, they'll say certain things which you just like let it slide because there doesn't seem to be a way where there was a proper way of complaining.
Yep. And also you're afraid of losing your job because you're just young and you're like...
Not really. I wasn't really afraid of losing my job, but there wasn't a proper recourse, right? There wasn't. I mean, you can quit and everything, but that's not, like, so. I think when it comes to these things, right, it wasn't so much that, but I didn't know the process, right, in the early days, right? So now that I think more companies are aware of it and there is a way of sorting it out, so that's better. But we would have been faced with some sort of harassment or the other.
But as time went on, I mean, you are Freda Liu. You are at the top of your game.
Yeah.
People generally don't want to mess with you.
Okay.
Because you've achieved so much. You're good at what you do. You're an author. We'll talk a bit about your book as well. So along the way, it kind of, did the harassment reduce because you could push your way back?
So if you're talking about sexual harassment, for sure, right? I know, but you get all kind of weird people online, right? Because you keyboard warriors, right? They can do all kind of things, but
Right.
it doesn't really bother me in that sense. But you get other kinds of.
Not within the company though.
No, not within the
Because they're
organization.
like, let's not mess with her. So do you kind of need to have this build up an armor over the years?
I don't think I have been in a work environment so far that encourages it, right? So I've been fortunate in this is not something that happens so much anymore, right? For my experience, it still happens to a lot of companies, right? But maybe I remember when I was 17, working in the hotel when I was 17, 18 years old, and my manager I'm working there and full view everybody, he touches my ass, right?
Okay.
And I'm 17, 18 years old and I said, what do you want? And then he just looked at me and said, oh, you're very daring. I said, yeah, what do you want, right? And then he never messed with me again. So this is also there wasn't a way for me to complain, but it was just like, you may be my boss, but what do you want?
Yeah.
And he could see it on my face. So, you got to speak up,
Yeah.
right? You got to push back.
Yeah.
If there isn't but I would say most organizations, I hope, are moving that. But the harsh reality is also sometimes, right, when the person's of authority,
Yeah.
right? It's very difficult.
Yeah.
So I understand that it's difficult in some cases.
Yeah. Have you heard of any major?
Yeah, I want to go back to a point that Freda was saying. Every woman has experienced sexual harassment, and so for the men out there watching, if you don't believe, just ask your woman friend about their experiences. And I think the message is, a lot of guys might be like, "Oh, how can that be true?" But have you talked to your women friends? From my experience, yeah, it is true. I mean, some have it maybe more subtle than others. So even things like, very common sort of so-called jokes like, oh, I have 4 spaces. Why don't you take one of my, spaces? Things like that. I mean, that's sexual harassment.
Yeah.
So
I've heard that,
and the thing is, it doesn't mean that all guys are necessarily harassers. It just means that there are enough guys who are harassing women, and the other guys are not doing enough to stop them.
Right.
They're not doing enough to actually say, look, that what you're doing is wrong, and it shouldn't happen. There are not enough guys who are looking at the company policy and look, do I actually have a sexual harassment policy? Do we actually have recourse? So as Freda saying, there was no recourse for earlier on. So guys need to actually be a bit more proactive and look into these things. Even if you're not a harasser, but are you doing enough to actually stop the harassment from happening?
Yeah. I think a lot of the guys are dicks. Sorry to say, like, guys, once we get a bunch of guys together, we'll say the stupidest, shittiest things, right? And it's all in the name of fun. It's not like we want to do any of these things, but then, hey, let's do it.
Yeah.
It's a stupid guy thing, right? And we should not encourage that, right? In many ways.
Right.
And I think you need someone strong within that group to be able to say, no, this is not.
Right.
It's a system. Back to the system.
Yeah, you see somebody, not even someone strong.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like, WhatsApp groups. I'm in my high school WhatsApp group or this. Just somebody saying, hey, actually that not so appropriate, or we're all grown up now. It's not. It's like just someone needs to say it. A lot of times, the people who are saying it, they don't think about it as, I'm being sexy. I purposely want to be sexy. They're just saying it because they think it's
herd mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They think what they're saying is popular. Then when someone says, actually,
Everybody laugh and everybody says, no.
Yeah, but. Sure, I've even seen the girls, but I'm sure deep down inside they feel it, right? And I think a lot of guys don't think about it at that particular moment, but if that happened to their mom or their sister, they'd probably go, what the fuck was that? Right? They suddenly have this, you can't say that about my sister, you can't say that about my mom and whatever it is, but then they don't realize that, right?
Yeah.
one of those mind-blowing moments that I have. I'm learning a lot. Now,
You
Freda,
didn't have a sister, right?
No.
That's the thing as well.
that makes a difference, doesn't it? Yeah. But I have nieces and stuff like this, and I worry about that sometimes. So I think a systemic change needs to happen, even all the way up, where girls stepping up, pushing their way back as you did, worry about being labeled the company bitch. Because I've seen this within where I overhear women say stuff as well. They will say, wow, she climbed up because she probably slept with the boss. Or stuff like that. Right? I thought women were supposed to protect other women and not say stuff like this.
Exactly, right? So we also putting out insecurities out there, and you have to think about it, right? Actually, women they've only joined the workforce 2 generations at most. If your mother worked, she was a nurse, a teacher, or that was secretary, right? Yeah. If your mother worked, right? I'm talking your age category.
Spot on. That's what my mom did.
Yeah. So our age category. So the younger ones. So women have also been later in the game entering the workforce, and maybe there's a lot of, sometimes you have to ask yourself, is there insecurity, embedded insecurity, that there is less work, less opportunities for us,
right,
and hence this behavior comes out, right? I like to understand the psychology of things,
right?
So maybe that could be it, right?
But I also overhear other bosses, female bosses, go, we'd rather not promote her because you know how girls are, emotional, and we don't know how she can handle
Really?
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you?
I think the point is valid in that unconscious or conscious biases occur in everyone. But I think the idea is two. So one is that the victim, so-called, of that unconscious bias in this instance is other women. And that's the first point. The second point is to say that generally speaking, if your decision-making body is more diverse, you're getting a more balanced perspective. So it's better on the whole to have sort of like a board or upper management that is more diverse in terms of gender and ethnicity and so on, than to have like a all men kind of.
But that situation, I heard it in a predominantly women strong or a woman strong organization or industry,
right?
Like the airlines industry,
right?
Because that's where women tend to.
Okay, and that's why gender equality is so important. It's never good to have too many of one gender.
Right.
We're just trying to. So there are certain industries where there too much of one gender is also not good.
Right.
I feel that's where you need to have gender equality before you can talk about diversity and inclusion with other things. We're not even equal yet.
Yeah.
Right? So too much of anything is never good.
How far away are we from 50-50?
Oh, very. I think in the rate
most upper management, or sort of look at top level, it's not even 20%.
Right.
In various sectors.
Do you think it will change in Malaysia if we had like a female prime minister?
Well, it would definitely help.
Yeah.
I think there's this thing called the role model effect.
Yes.
So if you're a girl and you see your prime minister as a woman, you aspire to be great. You aspire to be a prime minister one day, and you may not be prime minister, but you'll be something. Right. And there's studies that show this to be true.
It's called the role model effect. Okay.
Yeah. Freda,
What's that?
become prime minister?
No.
Running? No.
Not area of interest.
Yeah.
I feel that my effectiveness is in other things, right? And that will be through communicating, through writing my books, through these things, right? So it's just not my call. I'm a hope. So that's why I have a show, right?
Yeah.
About women empowerment, and I call it Women of Influence and Leadership, right? And representing women in all spheres, the role model. I didn't know that was a word, but like I want to talk about women in comedy, women in sports, so that when I hear that there are women in all these things, I can do it too. Right? And that's such an important message, right? Because now we have seen Jacinda Ardern.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a New Zealand prime minister. I mean, we've seen more women and all that, like Angela Merkel and all that, right? So when we've seen this, someone has broke that barrier.
There were a lot of hiccups along the way, though. I mean, we had Benazir
Bhutto,
then who else do we have?
How are the hiccups?
No, I mean, like people weren't really accustomed to it at that particular time. right?
I don't know if that was a gender thing, right?
Right.
Maybe they were at that time they were harsher because they were women ministers.
Yeah.
Maybe the criticisms, the reporting was harder. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And I think one important point to note is that over time, if you're the first, then definitely all the people's biases will still be there.
Yeah.
But if you're the first, you've inspired someone to be the second, third, fourth.
Yeah.
And then at the point of that time that happens, people's biases will change because they're used to it. It's no longer something new. So they no longer see you as a minority or whatever it is.
Right.
And women are not minority, but they no longer see you as, they don't longer judge you so much based on that aspect of yourself.
You know why 30%? There is, I didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, he's probably got the right science for it, right? I know, I read a book, this is a person who started a 30% club in the UK, right? And the moment in a room of 10 people, when there are 3 women, you don't notice that you don't notice it's a woman anymore, right? And the discussions get a little bit more varied.
Right.
But when there's only one, people will notice. So there is a science to why at least 30%.
Right.
There is a science to it.
So you're breaking up that herd mentality in a way.
Yeah, there is so we're not just doing it for fun. There's a science to it. So we can just get there, then things will change.
I always wonder about this. At the highest levels, and Prime Minister, President at the highest levels, right? Do they get the same pay? Like Jacinta Ardern, I always wonder whether they will get the same pay as a male Prime Minister. Do you have to fight for that?
Well,
Is
I
it in the
think
Constitution or
we probably do in terms of official pay. So like even in Malaysia, if you're an MP or minister or whatever, there's a fixed amount that you get.
Right.
So I mean that's maybe one model or sort of because everything's so transparent.
Right.
So it has to be equal. Whereas if you look at normal job settings, things are not transparent. So you don't know, and then all the unconscious biases and behaviors and all that come in, which create that disparity.
I was wondering about that. Why can't we put that model into like?
Yeah, and people are there's sort of more movements to make pay more transparent. So the idea is, why is pay confidential information? Think about it. Like why? Why is it in a company? Why would it be? It's just to give leverage to the company to pay people less.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're not open about things like pay, then what's stopping a company from paying men more and women less? I mean, there's companies. I know one think tank in the UK that did an internal audit, and they found that all the men had actually asked for pay raise, whereas women did not.
Right. But it's part of what you said in your book, though. I mean, like women aren't confident of their skills, and
it's two ways, though. It's two ways. So one is how women have been sort of taught to behave, and if you become someone who's asking for higher wage, then what does that say of you? Are you pushy or whatever? Right. And at the same time, people react to men and women differently. Yeah. If you come to me as a man saying I want a higher pay, then I mean, oh, this guy is strong leadership, whatever. If a same person but a woman came, then I might think, oh, this person's pushy, whatever. So and people have done studies on this, the various aspects. Even just looking at a resume, if a man comes in with a resume saying I'm part of the PTA, Parent Teacher Association, then or PIBG or whatever, they'll see. I mean, the study was in the US, so it's PTA. The employers tend to view them more positively than a man who was not part of a PTA. Right. But when a woman came and they said they were part of PTA, they viewed them more negatively than a woman who was not part of the PTA. So women get a deficit and men get a dividend
for saying the same thing,
for being a parent.
Right.
So it's not just that women do not ask; it's because the consequences of asking are different.
On that when you mentioned women want to push hard and get what they want, but then they pull back or they go too far. Sometimes there's a disparity in that. Freda, you wrote a book in your skin. Mm-hmm. Being comfortable knowing about your strengths, your capabilities, and asking for what you want, basically, right? I guess what I'm asking is, how can we as men help the women achieve what they want? Because we talked about this, it's a systemic problem. We men are the system, unfortunately. How do we help the women push through and get what they want So let's talk about your book, In Your Skin.
Okay, whether it's men or whether it's both, because again, it takes a village, right? So the book In Your Skin actually talks about being comfortable with your definition of success, right? So I featured people like Heidi Kwa, who does work with refugees, Pit Stop Community that does work with homeless, and to me they are successful.
Okay.
Right? Because they have found what their calling is. So that was the premise of that book. The previous book that I wrote called Bursting Fixed Mindsets, I featured women entrepreneurs, right? And how they thought differently. Okay, I want to come back and where men can come in or where individuals can come in to know the facts. So I was saying how only 20% of the businesses are owned by women, right, in this country. And when I did just very poll, the National Association of Women Entrepreneurs Malaysia, back when we had to pay GST, from their members, only 10% contributed to GST, which means revenues of 500,000 above.
Yeah.
That means 90% of the business are not even earning those kind of revenues. So when I talked to those, so when I wrote that book, Bursting Fixed Mindsets, I spoke to women who I knew had revenues in excess of 1 million, and I wanted to know what was different in their thinking, right? So when I talk about how things can change, like there were lessons learned from each other, right? One was this woman called, she runs the Institute of Data Scientists. Okay. And she heads it here in Malaysia. And she said, whatever you do, one of the lessons she learned was be a game changer. Whatever you go into anything, are you a game changer? Take gender out of it. Are you changing game or are you just follower? And this is a lesson you can learn whether you're a man or a woman, right? The other person I talked to was actually Christy Ng from Christy Ng Shoes, right? So she was saying that, and she talked about, and this was an aha moment for me, because by default, a lot of girls would join the company because selling shoes, right? Then after that, some men applied, right? And they joined. And she said, the moment men joined the organization, she said, my goodness, her thinking changed differently, right? Men were just a little bit more quick and decisive, less like, let's just get up, no, we'll help, we'll carry the table and all that. But like, that's why it was so important when you talk about gender equality. Too much of any one gender is not healthy for an organization, I feel, right? The other thing, I read a book years ago called Playing Big by Tara Moore. And that was when I realized, my goodness, and she's an American woman. And so she writes this book and you see the situations. It doesn't matter whether you're in America and Asia. One of the things she talked about was the good girl syndrome, right? And the good girl syndrome is when we go to school, we're very good at school, we do our work, the teacher, you submit it to your teacher, and your teacher comes back, A+, Freda, and so you're getting recognition for this, right? When you go to a work situation, you may not get that A+, Freda, right? So you just like, how come no one acknowledged me? No one, and then so, and this is something maybe genetic. Not genetic, but like I don't know, the whole systemic issue would have risen. You don't speak up about it. So one of the things is that if you've done a good job, if no one's gonna say you've done a good job, you better say you've done a good job.
Okay.
Right? Because no one's gonna notice it. Because this is not school, right? You're not gonna get a report card that says A+ for effort. You've got to speak up. So this was just like, wow, that was a moment for me. Yeah.
Agree.
So that. Does that come into equal pay as well? If you want equal pay because you're good at what you do, I want equal pay. Give it to me.
Well, yeah, there's, I should have equal pay, So but do we know what is everyone getting?
Yeah, it goes back to the transparency issue, right?
So does everybody know what we're getting? So I know, like when I was working for the MNC, right? We have different bands, right? So you're in that salary scale. So within that salary scale, I don't know whether I'm in the high end of that scale or the low end of the scale, right? Because there's always that little. So maybe the men are getting the higher end of the scale, and the women are. I don't know. I don't know, right? I just know I'm in this band and I'm in that scale, and this is my salary. So we haven't. I don't know the details of that.
So if we were more transparent about pay, you'd think this would solve the problem? It would help. I think, and so I think firstly, I think it's important to say that the wage gap does exist. If you look at official statistics.
How big is the wage gap?
I think it's about 70 something% to 100. So men might be earning 100 and the women will be earning around 70 something. So it does exist in Malaysia and globally. I think to your question on what can men do generally, it's not just with wage gap, but sort of biases generally.
Because we are the system.
Yeah, we are. That's right. And we need to approach it from a system point of view as well. So each company needs to take different steps to actually ensure that they're not acting upon conscious, unconscious biases. So there are things people are doing. You know, a lot of so Lean and McKinsey, they have this joint report they do every year, sort of to track progress generally and sort of make recommendations how to improve. So there are a few things you can do. So one is basic awareness trainings.
Right.
So do you even know you're conscious? So having unconscious bias trainings.
Right.
So to make people aware of. So I went to this Lean conference, unconference, and someone from McKinsey was speaking, and he said we did it in McKinsey, unconscious bias trainings, and some people we were able to say, okay, you are actually biased when in your recruitment, so you need to do X, Y, Z. And so they were fine. Okay, they were like, they understood. Some people were so biased that they just could not be recruited.
Right. They couldn't see.
So the solution was to say, you cannot be a recruiter. You're so biased and you're hopeless that you just can't recruit people. So they did that. You know, so I mean, trainings and awareness is one thing. The second thing you can do is to put in place other mechanisms to knowing that you have biases. How do I sort of tie my hands to ensure that I'm not acting upon my biases?
So enforce it, basically.
Yeah. So you can have things like if you're looking for a position, if you're looking for to hire someone in a position or promoting somebody, don't before you even look at any candidates, set some criteria. I'm looking for someone who has this experience, this skill, so that you can, when you start judging people, you can consciously match their skills and experiences to the criteria.
So some people, like, you can't see the gender, age. So you're just looking based on almost like the voice, but the voice you can still. Hey, it's actually a man, but it's
a dude, right?
It's a dude, you never know, right?
But in Europe they do that. Like you're not allowed to put
by law.
Right. You don't put your race, number one. You don't put your race and you don't put your gender. Right, but that doesn't happen here.
Here, it's common practice. You put picture, you put your gender, your age, IC number, your marital status. You put so much details that race, religion, it's totally unnecessary. That it's just ripe for discrimination. So it's the opposite. In fact, too much information. And the last thing I want to say is that companies need to set targets and monitor those targets to say, okay, if my company is 80% one gender, 80% man or whatever it is, and of all this particular ethnicity, then maybe that's an indicator that you're not looking, or you're not looking for diversity, or you're unintentionally leaving certain segments of society out. So if you look at, if your company, look at your top management. How many percent is actually women
on the board?
Can I share a story?
Yeah.
This is you must get hold. I mean, just go to this website called catalyst.org. They've been doing research for years on equality in the workplace and all that, right? So very interesting. So I've interviewed these people as well. So one of the things that she talked about was called sponsorship, and that was like a new thing to me, right? So sponsorship versus mentors. Women are very good at getting mentors, right? So we got mentor for this, for that. Right? But we don't have a sponsorship.
What's the difference?
Sponsorship is when you actually go up to someone senior in your organization and says, I would like to move up to this particular set, and you be on the lookout for me. So you have to speak up and ask for it too, right? Because if you don't speak up, they don't even know. You could even go up to the person and says, ultimately, I want your job. What do I have to do to get to your job?
Right.
Because the person also has to move, they also think it's succession planning. So you also, as an individual, as a woman, should also speak up about what you're doing, right? Then she also, in that interview I did with her, shared a very interesting story. It was a good story, and it's about Kimberly Clark. So the MD was having a meeting with, this is in the US or global, had a meeting with all the second liners, right? Said, now she asked all the top management, who is your second person in line for your job, right? Everybody's supposed to write a name. And he looked at all the names, right? And most of them, the second person in line were men. And he stopped, said, try harder.
Oh, wow.
Right? So this is from a man CEO. It says, try harder. And he says, how can it be that already there's all men, right? That all of you can only think of men. And Kimberly Clark, we sell things like diapers.
Yeah.
Right? And, at least half of them should be women, because, buying diapers shouldn't be a woman's responsibility, but at least a 50-50, right? Yeah. And you're not even thinking of that. They're mothers and all that. So she made sure that all of them, as the leader, the second person, put a woman in your name, in your succession planning.
Back to the system.
Back to the system. So it starts from the top as well.
When you look at right up at the top, I mean, in any country, it's government, right? are we doing it right now? I mean, if I look at the cabinet right now, I think there's like 5 women ministers, right? I think in the previous government, there were like more deputies.
Yeah, a bit more.
Yeah.
But in both cases, it was not more than 20%. It was a bit better previously. Now you're right, it's 5.
Yeah.
It's about 15%.
Right.
And previously it was about like 18 or 19%, depending on how you saw it. So we're not doing it well. And the only area that is doing it well is the judiciary, the civil courts, which is federal courts now. 8 out of 14 are women. But in terms of other sectors of government, no. If you look at even sort of like the Director General level, that top civil servants, it's also it's not 30%. It's not 30%. If you look at a bit lower, it's 30%. A bit lower, sort of the second level management, is a bit better. But in terms of top, which is what glass ceiling is really about, it's not even 30%.
I think with the 30% club, the top 100 companies, public listed companies, would have 30%.
Right.
They are working.
Required.
Well, they by law it should be required, but then they're actually seeing that the top 100 companies in the public listed companies are moving towards that figure. So they try to do it all, but say let's just work with the top 100. With the top 100, hopefully that would change.
Okay.
It will trickle down.
Right. I'm just thinking, if the administration could like enforce it within themselves, and then enforce it to companies that you have to do this, much like how Kimberly-Clark did, and how the other companies are doing, it would get a little bit better. But ultimately, it's still
Systemic, societal, cultural,
right?
religious.
So how can we change though? I mean, like we have hopefully more generations of men coming out, and then they're not gonna be as biased, they're not gonna be as chauvinistic and everything. Does WAO have any programs, educational programs to educate us?
Well, we do trainings, we do workshops, primarily focused on gender-based violence, sexual harassment, things like that. There are innovative programs out there that not currently run by WAO that really focus on this issue of really looking at men, as you say, sort of men are the system, so to speak. And so the idea is, how do we design a workshop that is going to be the most effective at changing men's mindset? So that means facilitators need to be men. You need to target sort of groups of communities that where they're like boys or men gather.
Facilitators should be men.
Facilitators should be men, and the reason is the design should be mixed, sort of, and the management and all that. But the facilitator, what some research has found is that boys and men, they feel more comfortable talking among their own gender, because they feel safe. They feel like people won't judge them. They might have a question that they really want to know, but they're embarrassed. So it's a bit of a safe space for them. And the other factor, which is kind of sexist thing, which is men tend to listen to other men a bit more. So that's why it's important for men to actually speak out. One, because they're morally, they should, as in terms of fairness. But secondly, because sometimes people are more like, some men are only going to listen to you. They're going to listen to. They're less likely to listen to a woman. So I mean, there are workshops and trainings that I would welcome anyone in Malaysia to do as well. In terms of WEO, we do run workshops. Some of the issues that we mentioned just now in terms of unconscious bias and things like that. How do you make a company more gender equal? These are things that WEO does. So if there's any company out there that would like to learn a bit more about this, feel free to get in touch with WEO. Our website is weo.org.my.
Actually, shouldn't companies actually have some active program running where we have to have this? If you're watching right now, just get in touch with WAO right now, because I think every company should be working hard towards this to change it up. Because if everything's like a country, generally I think having more women empowered makes a company better, makes a country better, right?
Yeah.
Contributes economically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, men, we apologize for a lot of the things that we've done in the past. We are still a work in progress. We want to do better by you. We want it to be 30%. In fact, we want it to be 50-50. But what's the next immediate step that we can take, instead of like there's a lot of pipe dreams and what we want to do, what we can do, and what we cannot do. What is the next real step that we can take to change things?
Okay, just back to his point about, I don't know the psychology behind it, but as well, I think like why a men facilitator, men generally don't dare to speak up. Like to talk about their things. Okay, this is just so. This is, or they feel uncomfortable. So I guess if it's in an environment where they're all men, they feel more safe, right? So I like to look at it as what can I do as a mother, right? I think it starts there. I don't know what's going to happen with this current, like my generation kind of thing. I mean, we are trying to do our things, right? Yes, you say policies need to change, but organizations also need to change because it is profitable for you. I have to tell you, by doing all this, you'll be profitable, right? By doing, I'm going to show you the stats.
Yeah, it affects the bottom line.
It affects the bottom line. If you intend to be in business for a long term, right? This is what's gonna help you. But I think the conversation that I have with my son is important as well. The kind of man that he'll be, right? How there is no stereotypes to how he's seen a mother work, he's seen his mother handle things, right? And that you should respect a woman. So I think it starts there. If you're a mother, to have that kind of conversation, not to have these unconscious bias between your daughter and your son.
Right.
This is important. This is, I think, what can you do? Like you look at the man in the mirror. It starts with you. This is what you can do as a woman, right? In changing the next generation, and of course, organizations. Really, you have to show them like. Whether it's showing the figures that it'll make a difference when you do that. So like it's good. I hope men will listen to it and make that that change. That understanding is different, right? Things like I hope you all just realize that going out there, we're just a little bit more conscious. Our handbag, our everything. We're just that's it. Unfortunately, right? So there are all these factors that are going on. So you can try, and if you don't know, I think it's polite to ask a person why, right? And have an like if you don't understand, ask a woman why politely, and hopefully the woman will explain to you, right?
I think there are two things. So one is, which is very important, I think, is to look at yourself and to make sure that you are not sort of actively perpetuating or really just having an honest look at yourself. Like at home, are you doing an equal amount of household stuff? Are you using sort of toxic language and blah 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 at the workplace? So things like that. So just really looking at yourself and having an honest look, and maybe ask, if you're really serious, you can ask around, ask your friends to sort of give you some feedback. The second is to see in your spheres of influence how you can actually sort of make positive change. So at home, at the work, and in the public sphere, what can you do? In your company, we talked about it a bit earlier. Does your company have good gender practices? Does it have a sexual harassment policy? Things like that. In the public sphere, if you're someone active in sort of civic space, are you supporting sort of initiatives that would actually contribute to a more equal society? So I mean, simple things like sexual harassment legislation. This is something that's in the pipeline. Things like employment laws that are that guarantee anti-discrimination and equality. Things like that are in the pipeline. So are you supporting those things or not? It could just be simple thing like you just tweet to your MP or something, say I support this. Things like that. So one is not to look at yourself, and second is to try to be a positive force. Something that never really took off. I don't know if it's still going. There was this hashtag he for she, right? Just check out that hashtag. There's this campaign.
Right, okay.
So it's a he for she. So what are some companies were on board? I think maybe it's a little bit more active in the US, but what were the things that they did? He for she.
Right.
So you can just check out the hashtag. I guess read through all the things, the initiatives that they were doing in the he for she campaign.
I think they probably were really active at one point, but then they've been sidelined recently by a lot of other
things, right?
But yeah, so physically, we're different, men and women. Celebrate the differences, embrace the differences, but I think ultimately we need to change the system, and choice is very, very important. We shouldn't enforce what we think are our own biases, and hopefully this will change in the next few generations or the next generation. Freda, Ren, thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully we can affect change from this little conversation. Continue this conversation right here. Leave a comment below. We want to hear from you. If you have any issues that you want us to chat about, we'll get all the experts in and we'll have sometimes heated discussions, and that's completely fine. Don't forget to subscribe. And this has been great. This has been What's Up With That. Remember, guys, be better.